They told me to sit outside because I wasn't family. 11 years later, I went to my sister's wedding, and believe me, I made sure they never forgot that day. But before I tell you what happened at that wedding, let me ask you this. What would you do if the people you loved most decided one day that you no longer belonged to them? Would you walk away and forget them? Or would you wait for your moment to show them exactly what they lost? Because that's what I did. And it all started with one dinner. A dinner that changed everything I thought I knew about family. Back then, I was just 17. My parents weren't rich, but we had a good life. Until my dad remarried. My mom had passed away when I was 12, and for years it was just me and my younger sister Clara. We were inseparable. I took care of her, helped her with homework, cooked dinner sometimes when Dad had to work late. She was my best friend. But then Dad met her, Melissa. She was charming at first, with her fancy clothes and perfect smile, the kind of woman who looked like she belonged in glossy magazines. Dad was smitten, and before I could even process it, she moved in. At first, I tried to give her a chance. She was polite to me when Dad was around, always calling me sweetheart and asking about school. But when he wasn't there, her tone changed. She started with little comments. "You're old enough to take care of yourself, right?" Or, "It's sweet that you still think of this as your home." It confused me, but I brushed it off. What mattered most to me was that Clara seemed happy. Then things started shifting. Clara was only 14 then, and Melissa slowly began to wrap her around her little finger. New clothes, expensive makeup, promises of a better lifestyle. Suddenly, Clara stopped hanging out with me. I'd come into her room and she'd quickly close her laptop or change the subject. I told myself it was just teenage stuff, but I didn't realize Melissa was slowly rewriting how Clara saw me and our mom. One evening, Dad announced that we'd be having dinner with Melissa's family. It was supposed to be a big deal. Her parents, her siblings, everyone. I spent hours getting ready, even wore one of Mom's old necklaces. When we got there, the house looked like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers, white marble floors, and everyone dressed like royalty. But from the moment I stepped in, I could feel eyes on me. Her family looked me up and down like I didn't belong there. I tried to be polite, smiled, introduced myself. But Melissa's sister barely nodded, and her mother gave a tight-lipped smile. Then, when dinner was ready, Melissa turned to me and said, "Oh, sweetheart, could you sit out on the patio? We don't have enough room at the table tonight." I thought she was joking. I laughed nervously, but she didn't smile back. Everyone else looked away, pretending like they hadn't heard. Even my dad, he cleared his throat and mumbled, "Just this once, okay?" My heart sank. I walked outside, sat on a cold patio chair while I listened to laughter and clinking glasses inside. It was humiliating. Every giggle, every sound of cutlery reminded me that they were eating while I sat outside like some stray animal. Clara came out once, looked at me awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry, but you know how she is." Then she went back inside. That night, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about the realization that I didn't matter to them anymore. Not even to my own father. Things only got worse after that. A few months later, Melissa convinced Dad to send me to live with my aunt for a while, claiming I needed a fresh start. My aunt was kind, but I knew it was exile. They wanted me gone. And once I left, I stopped hearing from them. My calls went unanswered, my messages left on read. I graduated high school on my own, got a scholarship, worked part-time jobs, and built a life from scratch. I stopped waiting for them to call. I stopped hoping they'd change their minds. But the pain, the betrayal, never left. I watched from afar as Clara and Melissa filled social media with pictures of family vacations, birthdays, holidays. My sister, the same girl who used to cry when we were apart, didn't even mention me once. Years passed. 11 of them. I built a career, made friends who felt more like family, and started healing. But one morning, I got an invitation in the mail. It was from Clara. "You're cordially invited to the wedding of Clara and Benjamin." I stared at it for a long time. My hands shook. Part of me wanted to rip it up, but the other part, the hurt, angry, scarred part, wanted closure. I wanted to look them in the eye and let them see what they'd thrown away. So I decided to go. But not as the broken girl they sent away. I'd made something of myself. I had a successful career, my own business, a beautiful car, and enough confidence to fill the room they'd once kicked me out of. I bought a stunning emerald green gown, got my hair professionally done, and showed up at the wedding venue looking like the person I'd always wanted to be. When I walked in, the first person to see me was Melissa. Her jaw literally dropped. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God," she said, clutching her pearls. You came," I smiled sweetly. "Of course I did. I wouldn't miss my sister's wedding." Her lips twitched. "Well, you weren't exactly expected." I cut her off. "That's funny. I got an invitation. Must have been a mistake, huh?" Before she could respond, Clara walked in, radiant in her gown. For a moment, I saw the little girl I used to protect, but then I saw the flicker of discomfort in her eyes. She hadn't expected me either. "Wow, Clara," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You look beautiful." "Thanks," she said softly. I didn't think you'd come." "Why wouldn't I? Family always shows up, right?" You could hear a pin drop. The tension was thick, but I kept my smile. Now, before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. If you were me, standing there after 11 years of silence, would you have stayed quiet? Would you have played nice just to keep the peace, or would you have made sure the truth came out? Because what happened next, it wasn't planned, but maybe it was fate. The ceremony started beautifully, all smiles and flowers, but during the reception I noticed something strange. Melissa kept whispering to people, pointing at me like I was a problem that needed solving. Then the MC came over and politely said, "Miss, would you mind giving up your seat? It seems there's been a mix-up with the table arrangements." I froze. It was happening again. 11 years later, they were trying to make me sit outside. I stood up slowly, smiled at the MC, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Oh, you mean the same way they made me sit outside when I was 17? The entire table went silent. People turned to look at me. Melissa's face turned pale. Clara looked horrified. "What are you talking about?" someone asked. I looked right at Melissa. "Ask your lovely stepmother." She once told me to sit outside because I wasn't family, and my father agreed. 11 years later, I guess nothing's changed, the crowd started whispering. Someone even gasped. Melissa tried to speak, but her voice trembled. "That's not true. She's exaggerating." But Clara stood up. Her hands were shaking. "Is that true?" she asked Melissa. "Did you really do that?" Melissa stammered. "Sweetheart, it was a misunderstanding." But Clara turned to me, tears in her eyes. "You were outside?" "That night?" I nodded. "In the cold. Listening to you all laugh inside." The music had stopped. People were staring. Melissa's perfect facade was cracking. My father, who looked older, frailer, stood up too. "Let's not do this here," he muttered. But I didn't let it end there. "No, Dad, you let it happen. You let her treat me like a stranger. You sent me away and never looked back. You made me feel like I didn't exist." He tried to look at me, but he couldn't. For once, he had no words. Clara burst into tears. She left the table and ran outside. I followed her. Outside, she turned to me crying. "I didn't know, I swear. She told me you wanted to leave. She said you hated us." I took a deep breath. "I never hated you. I just wanted to be your sister. But she made sure you saw me as someone else." Clara hugged me tightly. It felt like a decade's worth of pain melting away. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. I was stupid. I believed her. We stood there for a long time, crying and holding each other. When we finally went back inside, Melissa and my father were nowhere to be found. People were whispering, looking at me differently, not with pity, but with respect. Clara made an announcement later that night. She took the microphone and said, "I want to thank everyone for coming. But before we continue, I want to apologize to someone very important, my sister. I hurt her, I believed lies about her, and I let her suffer. But today, I want everyone to know. She is my family. Everyone clapped. I tried to hold back my tears, but I couldn't. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about finally being seen, being heard. After that night, Clara and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. She called me every week. We met for coffee, talked about old memories, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had my sister back. Melissa and my father, though. They divorced a few months later. Apparently, that night opened more wounds than they could handle. I didn't celebrate it, but I didn't mourn it either. Sometimes karma doesn't need help. It just waits for the right moment. Looking back now, I don't regret showing up to that wedding. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story, my dignity, my place. So if you've ever been told you don't belong, remember this. Sometimes the best way to respond isn't with anger. It's by living well enough that your presence alone says everything. If you were on my side in this story, please like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have confronted them the same way or just walked away? And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like this one. I'll see you all in the next story.